All right, well, anyway, so this is Catherine Lambert. I'm with the Highland Park Historical Society. Tonight is one of two nights where this topic is Ask the Archivist. When we planned this some time ago, we thought Ask the Archivist Day was tonight. And then when we saw the poster that was put out, it was next Wednesday. So we decided, since the information's already out for tonight, we'll just proceed, and yet we will honor this day again next week. So this is an opportunity to ask the archivist things. She's going to give an initial presentation, but this is Nancy Webster, who began working with historical collections in Highland Park in 2010 when she launched the Community Archives program with a grant from the National Archives, National Historical Publications and Records Commission. And I have to tell you, I was no longer involved with the Historical Society at the time. When I read that in the paper, I was very impressed. Since beginning the Community Archives program in collaboration with this authority, she has written and managed $50,000 in local and Illinois state grants for digitization and other history and cultural projects. I think his 50,000 is on the low side. It's several $100,000.
Kathy, it's 250,000.
I didn't correct my.
Let me put that in here.
That's a big difference. She teaches at Dominican University. I'll let you go. As an adjunct instructor, currently teaching advanced archive seminar. Previously, she worked at the Bentley Library, the Chicago History Museum, and Molex Connector Corporation. She received her master's in library services and BA from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. And prior to her 30-year career as an archivist, Webster worked as a translator, political science researcher, au pair, wait person, and bartender. And her years working in restaurants provided a base for this project. I think I borrowed from another era. I think
that's
that was
okay.
Flora and fauna.
But in its own way, it does, right? Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And first of all, yes, of course, we're here to answer questions. But also we have a bank of questions, of frequently asked questions. So unless someone raises their hand or puts something in the chat, I'm going to share my screen and just kind of start with these most frequently asked questions. And Kathy will tell me if I need to stop. So first of all, this Saturday is open house at Stoopy Log Cabin. And you come by anytime from 10 to noon and have a visit. We look forward to these. ASM stands for Ask Me Anything. And within reason, that's okay. Please feel free to ask me anything. So I will also say, so June is International Archives Month. October is American Archives Month. I don't know why the 2 months are separate. And I generally celebrate June for a variety of reasons, but because we had so many backlog of questions, we thought, well, let's just do this. And we've been talking about doing it for a very long time. So where we live, or you live, Highland Park was carved out by glaciation. And that's why you have the moraines and the ravines. And there's not a lot of photos of the clay and the glacial drift, but there are some.
Where in Lake County were Catholic folks buried before church cemeteries were established? The Daggett Cemetery seems to be primarily for Lutherans. If buried on their farms, were the bodies typically removed when the farms were sold? And if so, to where?
Well, first of all, you are correct. The Daggett Cemetery is chiefly Protestant, a variety of Protestant. The Catholic families, which were buried near Green Bay Road, near the second location of the St. Mary's Church, the first church built in this area. And because people came to this area in 1833 and the church was built in the 1840s, it was well established that the Catholic families were buried in the area. Certainly, sometimes people were buried on their farms, that's true. And the bodies in the former Catholic church by the former Catholic cemetery were moved to what's now the Mooney Cemetery, or St. Mary Cemetery in Lake Forest. But yes, Catholics were buried right on Green Bay Road. And there's rumors that there's still bodies there. I don't know. But you can certainly, if you look at an aerial photograph, you can see the indentations from where the graves were there. That first church. Does that answer the question? And we actually have some pictures of that. You can see the graves in these pictures of the abandoned church. Oh, that's the older one. That's the second one.
He said it was helpful.
Oh, good, good. But I know we do have churches on here. I don't know why it's not. Sometimes these don't come up like you want them to. And then the sickest thing, we just put church. Since we put these up here, we should be able to find them easily, but that's not always the case. It was often referred to as marquettes in the early year when they had the visiting priests. And this is actually a postcard. It's labeled marquette. And yeah, I thought you could see, this picture doesn't have really good, but they were little, you can see the tombstones that were still back there, even after the church was long abandoned.
Now, wasn't
And
this
a
also
cyclone there
St.
too.
Mary's was a log cabin church?
Yep, this is it.
Oh,
There's
there's
some
the
other
log
photos
cabin.
too.
There you go.
Yeah. And we also have some lovely paintings of it by Orson Brand's brother, Enoch Brand, that are we're hanging City Hall. They're now in storage. If anyone's interested, they can always bring them and share them somehow. So going back to this area became part of the United States in 1833 with the removal of the Native Americans and this treaty. We did not have, outside of explorers, white people here so much until the 1830s and 1840s. And my source for this, and in the last few years, the National Archives has put on line all the treaties. It's a very helpful resource for researching pre-European settlement for everybody. And they have all the treaties and the numbers, and you can see, I use this with my students because they see how we break down archives into series and groups and collections. And the Native Americans were removed largely to Kansas. A few lingered around, but things had not been going well, and it was a pretty large removal. A question I get frequently is, where was the Northwestern Military Institute located? It was located at St. John's Ravine Drive and Beach. I have two pictures here. I'm kind of cheating a little bit because this is the first St. John's Military. The boys built it down in 1888, shortly after they moved in. It originally was a hotel and a college for girls, Highland College for Women, in the 1870s and 1880s. Because the Chicago Marathon is this Sunday, and its first few years, 1907 through the mid-teens, it began in Highland Park. And here you have, this is an image actually from the Chicago History Museum, the Daily News collection. This is the second building, the second Northwestern Military Academy, designed by local architect and mayor, William W. Boynton. And I guess it was the perfect place to start from the military academy to Grant Park for a marathon, 26.2. And that burned down in 1915. Again, it was military cadets who burned it down accidentally. They were scared to call the fire department, apparently. And you can see here's the early years when they first were lined up, and how like you see the electric rails and electric lines coming up and back. There's one of the uniforms, and it's now in Lake Geneva. They expanded it, and they were doing water, and now it's part of St. John's and Northwestern Military in Lake Geneva, and is still an active school. So people, more than anything, when I do the monthly downloads of what people looked up on our catalog, what people looked at online, it's always the same. The Moraine Hotel is consistently searched, and we have a series of images. We have everything from a picture of the old sign, which is one of our artifacts, to one of the 60s images of the pool. And it apparently holds a legendary place in searchers' hearts, this hotel on the lake that's now a dog beach.
No, I was going to add about the Moraine Hotel. One of my questions I've asked from the American Museum of the Military Museum that's up in Great Lakes on the American Sailor. I've
The
asked
American
him for
Sailor.
many years, where did John Philip Sousa live? And
Yeah.
we learned he lived sometimes at the Moraine Hotel if his wife was in town, and if she wasn't in town, then he lived somewhere in Lake Bluff. But he brought his band with him, and they lived up in Waukegan. There's some trivia for you.
That was surprising. That was very interesting. But this month we had a couple of surprises. The most searched or viewed item on the Digital Library of America was a set of petitions that were part of the city records of people swearing oaths to the city in the late 19th century. And here's one of those pages of Moses, who was one of the first merchants in town and had a store by the train station and also was alderman and very active. And this one too, it's not every month, but consistently, one of the top viewed images online is this picture of the Hiawatha Pioneer Trail. We're not really sure what street it is. We think it's Sheridan. So people ask sometimes the pictures that all the information isn't there, but oftentimes if we see this picture in Archivist and we're putting it up, we give you the information in the catalog that we have. We welcome more, but it just says in the catalog that this is a street in Highland Park, the Hiawatha Trail. And I'm guessing it's Sheridan. And the Hiawatha Trail was a big promotion that was begun. They had a dedication May 15th, 1964 in Grant Park. I recreated the word dedication there. And it was sponsored by the American Petroleum Institute because they wanted to encourage people to take automobile trips to buy gasoline, to sell more gas. And you can see how the Hiawatha Trail, it was with Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, and Iowa, came down by the chain of lakes and came back down by the Illinois beach, by the Great Lakes Naval Training. There was no Sailors Museum then, and down to Ravinia Park. Here's a large one in Chicago. And this was an entry. Now, in 1972, the Illinois signs were all taken down. And in every state, eventually all the signs for the Hiawatha Trail were taken down. But it was meant to be a historic travel route. And I looked today on eBay, and people sell those brochures. And the map, actually, I found on Internet Archive. It's the Illinois Sesquicentennial brochure. Okay, this covers a broad spectrum of questions, regular questions. I have an own envelope. I have a full photo. I can't find the home. We were driving all around. We drove here all the way from XYZ. We haven't been here in 50 years. I'm driving around. I can't find the house number. Well, there's a reason for that. And the reason is that house numbers in some street names changed in Highland Park in 1906, in 1915, and in 1950. So this is older stuff. We put all these numbers on History Pin, which was kind of a project that one of those social media softwares that didn't really take off, but it's still there with the number conversions from the 1950s. And you'll note also people changed street names. Sheridan Road from Central Avenue to up through Highwood was called Port Clinton for many years. In 1820, there was a petition to change it to Sheridan, and it was changed by the end of the century. By 1900, it was changed, which is interesting because, as you may or may not know, there have been petitions to change Sheridan Road to something else based on some of the massacres, including the Murray Massacre of Native Americans when Sheridan was general in what was called Indian Territory. So you have something on Port Clinton Avenue, you might wonder where it is. So we have a chart, and one of our wonderful volunteers at the Historic Society did this chart with the streets and names that we put on History Pin. And I remember, I think for a few years when I first started working there, I was puzzled. Like some of these, there was, an odd number on one side of the street when usually all those numbers are even. So we have these Sanford maps in the collection, but the Library of Congress have digitized the ones that are not under copyright. So we can go and we can look at This is 1900 Central Avenue. And I wonder if I can't really, and you can see there's numbers, you can see Port Clinton Avenue. And if you look to, I'm trying to see if I can make that a little bit bigger. Maybe I'll stick to airfront view and bring that up. So one thing is frequently I will do that to look up and find out, oh, what was that number? And they were not odd on one side, even on the other side, which I have to say over and over. And the numbering in what was the original plating of Highland Park, which is about a quarter size of what it is now, changed several times. And it can be a challenge to find that address, but we have ways. And so it's a little bit more difficult with some of the places we're next later, like Westridge, or as they had next is Ravinia was added and Braeside was added, and Highland Park eventually, and it's about the same outside of what was Fort Sheridan and became part of Highland Park. The geographic boundaries became set in 1924. My handy earfan view, that I really love to, you can see Port Clinton Avenue, and now we can zoom in. And you know where Sheridan, this corner here, you can see the number. I'll just do that again. This corner was 2007. And if you go forward, next time you see it in around 1912, the same corner, they're at Sheridan Road now. And they helpfully put the other numbers below it in the updated map. It's 208, 203, and 201, 203, and 205. And that's about 12 years later. And then we skip up to 1918 after another change. And they helpfully put the new numbers down again. And we have 377 and 376 and 373 at the same corner as Sheridan Central. Of course, now it's a completely different number, of course. And we have, you can still see, because I was a little puzzled a few times, but I was trying to figure the numbers out, as I mentioned. And this is Orson Brand's studio. It's an ice cream store, ice cream hotel. Let's see all these. I have a link in this way. These digitized maps are very helpful on a daily basis when people have these questions about addresses. So we are always can help because street numbers change. There was Maria Street, that's not, and people get puzzled by that. And Ravinia became Ivy. So that's not the boundaries. And because it is a little bit more difficult when you're looking at some of the older buildings, like the farms that were not part of the city.
This is a wonderful talk. Will there be a genealogy classes offered for help with Lake County research? I personally struggle with researching legal land descriptions.
It is a challenge. Yeah, we agree.
But we're going to a program that's on that topic, I believe, legal land descriptions. Maybe she walked away. I just caught her. But if you want, you can send an email and I can send you the description, because I believe it's on legal land descriptions, and it's the Wadsworth Historical Society next Thursday night at 7 o'clock. And there is a Lake County genealogical group. In fact, their archives, once the Carnegie Museum is the Carnegie Library is open, maybe later this fall or early next year, their archives are going to be there, located at that location in Lake Fort and Waukegan. So there are groups around here that could help you.
One thing about the land descriptions Lake County, which is they are consistent. That's one thing from the 1850s from now, the section numbers have remained the same. That still means you have to read through lines of section X by X by X by what, but you can pinpoint relatively closely where you want to go. So I thought you shared too, sometimes people use our collections for books. In this case, David Adler was a well-known architect, had a sister who's was a very well-known interior designer, and we just happened to have these photos that the original family owners, the Mandels' niece, donated to the Historical Society of slides that were taken when they decorated their house. And there was a new book being created about her, Frances Alkins, visionary American designer. And they used about 20 of the slides of this house that is now owned by Billy Corrigan, and the designs that she did inside, which was interesting too, because I was happy. I'm not knowledgeable in interior design. When the woman donated these and sent them from Boston to us and telling how she lived in the Claridge house with her mom during World War II when her dad was at the war, I thought, well, that's nice, because we often have many pictures of exteriors, but interiors of homes we don't have as much. They were lovely of of these images, and some of them were hand colored. And there's some outside as well. You can see the bridge over the ravine in the back. And so it's they're featured in this new book. Another recent book, you might have thought that Leopold and Loeb had been exhausted, but they are not. And they used to send Summers up here. If you're not familiar, Leopold and Loeb were the two young men who murdered their cousin in the early 20th century, and quite a famous case. And Clarence Darrow argued for them. And so, but we did have an exhibit on the Wildwood, the Jewish community lived there, and a presentation. So we were able to help the researcher find more about this adolescent, Nathan Leopold, and he's written a well-received book. He's actually giving a presentation about it in the next couple of weeks. You can say Wildwood was on Hazel Avenue, and we were lucky to have one of the people that lived there as a young child come and speak at the Historical Society. And later, the same presentation was narrated by Bea Axelrod.
And we have that talk online at YouTube.
I have the link in the presentation.
Oh, okay.
As well.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
But no, I haven't put it in the chat yet, but I will. I will put the link. Everything's linked here in the presentation. So one wonders, why is the founder of the state of Rhode Island linked to Highland Park, Illinois? Well, there's two things. Interestingly, Roger Williams Avenue, this is a plat from an atlas of the 1880s of Ravinia. And you can see all these are all Baptist missionaries. Roger Williams was an economical Enlightenment Baptist sort, and Rice, Kincaid, Judson were all Baptist ministers of various, Bronson, Marshman, every single one on this map were all Baptist ministers. And coincidentally, but having nothing to do with the street naming by the original Baptist colony that settled in Ravinia, Roger Williams, the first mayor of Highland Park, was a descendant of Roger Williams. There he is, Frank Hawkins. He ran twice for mayor within 50 years, and this is really his second. We often use the portrait from his first, when he was the first mayor, but this is him in Ravinia with two other women and watching the cars come in. So we have two ties, strong ties to Roger Williams that are not related, but the street is, of course, the central business district in Highland Park. And this picture, the picture I have in the front, that is in Switzerland, the Reformation statues. This is Frank Hawkins, Minnie Dooley, and Miss Minnie S. Reader. So we talk about the first house of worship in Highland Park being the Catholic Church, that we think was kind of about where the Ravinia Fire Station was originally. Then it was moved to Green Bay, and now it's at its current location. It's just renamed itself again. But the church building that's still standing right here, where Dean and Judson come together and point into Roger Williams, the original Baptist church is still standing at that corner, and it is now a private home. So I think it's not been expanded from what I can see that much.
No, but I've walked past it a lot. You can make it out. You can figure out what
you can.
Original.
Okay. But that's always, I thought, an interesting fact. You see, Gurney still Gurney is the one who sold the land to the Highland Park Building Company, who developed it, but he still owned land and was still speculating land into the end of the 19th century. So we get this question, where did Cliff Montgomery, the actor, live in Highland Park. He didn't. So his mom helped his biographer write the biography, and she wrote all these things about him being in Highland Park and their house and being chased down the street in Ravinia. And it's in his biography, and people call about it and said, what's the address? And after extensive research, and other researchers did extensive research, and working with the Billy Rose Theater Division archives at New York Public Library, we have established that he never lived in Highland Park. We don't believe. There's no evidence. And we have other addresses in the census with his father. So maybe his mom she kind of it's kind of a bit grandiose sometimes, maybe a little bit of fabulist. But we worked really hard to find some shred of evidence that he ever lived here. He did not. Lived in Chicago. Many other famous people did. Jean Harlow, Orson Welles. But that is one question. And it's in the biography, and it's a relatively new biography. So understandably, people want to follow up with that. People, again, the genealogy, I'm researching a soldier who served at Fort Sheridan. Now, Fort Sheridan is a U.S. Army base, was a U.S. Army base from 1888 to 1993. There's a picture of some of the builders. It's a really cute picture, I think. So sometimes we have information. We have an ephemeral, what we call an artificial collection of pictures like this and maps and information about Fort Sheridan. We have some pictures of family snapshots of some German prisoners of war, some pictures of horse shows, and it's all listed in the catalog. However, if you want to get actual soldiers' records, you need to contact the National Archives. Unfortunately, in 1973, there was a large fire at the St. Louis Medical Records, and they're still cleaning it up all these years later. But they can help you find something. And when Fort Sheridan closed, there's a little museum, and items from the museum got split up. Some of them are at Lake County, some are at the Army College in Pennsylvania. So these little steps, and eventually you'll find what you need, but there's more than one step. Sometimes it will always help you find where that soldier was. And we have some great pictures, as you've probably seen online as well, of the fort. It says on the back, it says Mr. Wittens, who was the interior designer too, is in the back, and Axel Roberg, who is a Highland Park resident, but it doesn't say which one he is. So it's still fun. The Ehrenberg family donated this as well. So we do have a rich photography collection here in Highland Park, and there's a reason for that. Early photographers, both professional and amateur. This is Orson Brand's photography shop, Codex, and this picture is from his friend, George Rice collection. George was the chaplain at Fort Sheridan. And before he lived for a few years in Highland Park and became friends with Orson Brand, he took photos all over the world of soldiers, American soldiers abroad in the Philippines and Africa. And we don't know if he left them with Orson or how we even got to the Historical Society, but we had this wonderful glass slide collection that, in addition to these foreign images and images of American soldiers abroad, were taken in Highland Park. And we don't know who that man is, if that's George or someone else. But they certainly had a few pictures of them hanging out together, the photographers. Another collection is the Frank Green collection, and we have no idea who took those pictures. But they do have pictures of Frank Green here, who married Bertha Baker, who became one of the first teachers in Highland Park and was a poet. And this is Jim McDonald. He opened it was called McDonald's Corner, right there at the corner of St. John's, where Chase Bank is, at St. John's and Central, was called McDonald's store, McDonald's Corner, because he was a speculator as well. And that's the only picture I know that we have of him. And that was in the Frank Green collection. And the family put it together. There's some pictures from Michigan from the Baker family before they moved to Highland Park, but there's 10 types of everyone in the family. And some of them may have been taken by Orson Brand, but all these old studios from the 19th century kind of look alike, unless, there's some distinguishing feature. Jessie Lo Smith, we've talked about so many times about Jessie Lo Smith. This is a hand-colored picture of Glacier National Park when it's first opened. And he was a teacher, and this is with him. I know his friends, the Millards. You can see them looking up at the big trees in Glacier National Park. Another photographic contributor is Jacob Hetzweiler, and we only have a few pictures of his, but there's some very iconic ones. This one, I don't know why it's so blurry. Maybe it's coming in, of the the young men who were the life-saving men on the lake. He also took a picture of veterans in the early 20th century that has many Civil War veterans in it. Jessie Lo Smith's buddy, Mr. Perrott, would take hand color pictures and show them all, and they were really quite lovely. As you can see, and we've used them in many exhibits. They were writing a book about the flora and fauna of the area, and they never finished it. But we have these photos. I'm still looking for that manuscript someplace. Another, and we don't know what happened with Mr. Hexwell's photographs. Percy Pryor was a more recent photographer in Highland Park. He died in 2016. And we tried to find his photos, and without success. I remember leaving him messages on his answer machine 10 years ago. But then his nephew, General PK, told me that he actually threw everything out when he closed his shop. Ravinia. This is a picture he took of a Green Bay school. And we have to remember our Henry Ehrenberg, who took so many he documented 20th century, mid-20th century Highland Park. Here is this building still standing, the former electric railway, and this little statue. And I've had numerous requests. People are trying to find that statue. We don't know where it went. We tried. We have pictures. But at some point after 1963, and this picture was taken by in the 20s, shortly after it was built. We don't know where the statue went. If it destroyed it, it's hidden in a warehouse someplace. Another picture by Harry Amberg. This is the stone they put. It was a landmark rock by Exmoor Country Club, and it was moved in front of the Stupy Cabin. When they moved the Stupy Cabin, you can see it being taken apart back there. And this is a picture taken by Henry Ehrenberg with the curator Bob Robinson, original curator of Highland Park, and Dave Fritz, who was at the time the head of the park district. And we're not sure who the other guy is, unless Henry set his camera. A couple other landmark photos. You may have driven by this in Highland Park, this trough that was built around 1896 by Charles Yerkes, who donated this one in Evanston and one here at Sun Forest in Sheridan. You can see it had two drinking fountains, one for the horse and one for people. And they always call this Jerry the horse, but no one knows who Jerry the horse was. And it seems that there are lots of horses named Jerry in Highland Park. So this a mystery to be solved. And here you can see it right in the sun now. I thought I had a picture of it as I missed that. I must have missed that. I thought I put a picture of the trough, but I did not. There's a pretty picture I have of it now being a trough, and that's what it's probably not displaying. That's telling me you have an image. It's a picture of a woman like in the 60s and 70s. They fixed it up and made a landmark with a trough and flowers, watering the flowers. Oftentimes, researchers answer questions for archivists. In this case, or donors. This is Woodridge Avenue in Highland Park. This is the bridge being built in the early 30s. And we had this lovely scrapbook in the collection, and there was no attributions. It's called Building the House. And there are captions like, horses, bricks, almost finished, contractors, architects. And I showed it. We had an open house in 2011, halfway through the National Archives grant. And I showed it to one of our board members, Lori Reinstein, who's now passed away, is a lovely woman. I said, it's just a mystery to me, this scrapbook. And she said, that's my grandfather. Her family had donated it to us. And so we're able to reunite the intellectual information and catalog it along with the physical scrapbook. Now, I haven't gotten this question for a while, but people often ask, do you have pictures of the Ravinia fire? And yes, we do. I'm not sure who took them, but they're in our Ravinia Park collection. And you can see when they set back up the fire, and the fire took place in May 14th, 1949. And one of our board members, Jeff Stern, actually went and saw the fire afterwards. Didn't he, Kathy? Talk about
I'm
that?
not sure.
I think he told me about that. They did go and look afterwards.
I wouldn't be surprised, of course.
So people frequently ask about high school yearbooks. Highland Park High School changed its name a couple times, first of all. And in 1935, 1936, it was before 1936, it was serving both Deerfield Township and what's now called Moraine Township, as well as to the north, Shields Township, taking the name Deerfield Shields. And we have no evidence that there were yearbooks between those years in Highland Park. We have yearbooks from early in the 20th century. We have yearbooks after 1947. We do not have anything in between. We do have the Shoreline, which is a school newspaper, and frequently they have class photos in them. So that's where we need to go to find class photos. We do know that we have in 1912, it says the Deerfield Volume 1, but we do know pictures were taken, and we do know that there were probably yearbooks before then as well. And because of the name, because Deerfield High School began in the late 50s, is sometimes people are looking for they're trying to figure out where they're trying to look, because Deerfield Township, Deerfield West Deerfield Township, Deerfield High School. But from 1890, it was officially Deerfield Township High School until 1904, when it became Deerfield Shields High School, until 1936, where we reverted back to its original name. And this is, they put these little numbers on their basketballs, which helps us tell which year it is. And I chose this picture because Clinton Frisch, in the here, I think he's the one holding the ball. His granddaughter works at the Highland Park Public Library, and she says it's the only picture she's ever seen of him with hair. And she cherishes that picture. Things come to archives in various ways, and sometimes we don't really know how or why. In this case, we have a scrapbook that was compiled by an art teacher named Lucille Wood. And from the late teens to the 1940s, she kept meticulous documents of children in her art class. And it's very interesting because at least we've helped several families or memorial groups that could not find another picture of someone who was killed in combat. In one case, someone killed in the Netherlands. In one case, a young man who was in a POW boat that was bombed by the United States because they thought it was a Japanese warship. And the only pictures we've been able to provide for the memorials or for the tombstone have come from this scrapbook by this art teacher, Lucille Woods. So that's kind of a fun way to help people. And mostly they're group pictures, but here she shows its students working in the classroom. If you're not familiar with Better Homes in America, the Better Homes and Gardens, of course, you're familiar with the magazine, but it was a movement that peaked in 1929 with the crash and the bubble. But Highland Park High School, or previously Deerfield Shields, was very active in this concept of building homes, better homes, and they won prizes for that. And they have some of the scrapbooks that have been digitized that show the homes and show the boys building the homes. So the image that is gone haywire we have two brochures in the collection that are available on the Illinois Digital Archive and the Digital Library of America. And they show what the boys have built, and the young people, and the woman, of course, is very sexist. The woman in the home ec class worked on the decorating these homes. So here's they called it the 50th anniversary, counting from 1890, even though they've been graduating kids for 12 years or more before that, meeting in both Elm Place School and above the brand paint store. And it tells us, I refer to people this frequently because it really tells them what is what at the high school and where. And some great pictures. A lot of the early yearbook pictures do not ID people, which is kind of frustrating, but at the same time, we can still get a little bit, and it tells you kind of how it all evolved if you're interested in the high school history or people that attended there. And part of that building is still there, and they've built the newer school around it. one of the most intriguing things that we've had in our collection. So the Cobbs were very, very involved in social society in Highland Park and clubs. Mrs. Cobb was very active in advocating for women's education, women's rights, and the Soley Club, the Highland Park Club. Her husband was mayor. They're from the South. One of their sons was Bula, and he volunteered as an ambulance driver, as his friend Bill Krager, who also grew up in Highland Park, did in Paris. And his family donated, was actually his brother's widow donated these letters to the Historical Society. And there's a correspondence going back between Bill, who stayed in the Navy, and Bula, Melville, who came home, talking about being on the French front before the Americans joined the war. And he says, I'm damn glad to be alive. We're all ready to quit as soon as possible. War is not fun. But I kind of, I feel like that the relief of someone like just sitting there, driving an ambulance through fields of death, and wow, I'm happy to be alive, and let's go have fun. And this is, you can't see it really well, but this is Kennesaw Mountain, and we have a group of Civil War letters from the former city clerk, John Finney, and he wrote home his parents, who were, and now it's now Gurnee, and according to the census, they spoke Irish. They were literate. According to him, they had drinking problems, but he sent letters making a note every day, and I assume someone read them to him, talking about the war, and really astute, firsthand observations of the march to the sea. So that's the end of my answers to questions. If you have more questions, please let me know.
Can I share screen for a moment? Because I did look
Yeah,
up
yeah.
that program at the Newport Township that's in
Oh, great.
Wadsworth. Public domain land sales. Maybe that's not quite what you were looking for, but Al Westerman, pretty interesting person. So I just want to highlight this to you. It happens to be, it's next Thursday. I plan to attend. It may apply to what you were interested in, maybe not, but it's what I thought I'd highlight since I brought it up. Anyway, Nancy.
And I don't know how helpful they are, because you have to pay to use the recorder's office records on Lake County, but if you ever go there, they're so well organized, and they have everything on shelf by name and categorize it. And the recorder and the people in the recorder's office know these land grab, these how this works, and they probably could be more help than anybody. There's the link to the presentation with the links. Does anyone else have any more questions?
So what do archivists do, if you don't mind saying?
What do archivists do? Well, if you want to break it down into two broad categories, we preserve and make accessible items that are unique and primary, that have evidence information about our history, intrinsic value. We do that by doing physical things to prepare them, and we want to achieve intellectual and physical control, so we know what is where and what it is. That's the broad, so that involves in deciding what to collect, where to collect, how to collect, what parameters you set. Is a little bit easier in a place where it's community history, it's Highland Park, or if you work in a government office where you're governed by laws, that what is kept and when, and what goes to archives, what gets destroyed, what is an active record. Does that answer, or you want to?
No, that's okay. But also, there's also the process of how you store things too, so that things will continue to carry on.
Right. So in addition to intellectual control, which means cataloging and knowing what is it, describing it, how we physically store it, there's 10 things that mostly endanger archives, but we want to protect it on both a macro level, being in a large environment, whether it's a room that doesn't have the RH is the biggest enemy, actually fluctuating RH has changed the composition, have a stable temperature, have security, fire prevention is important, protect it from light, all these things, light, movement, insecure shelves, water, fire, our age and temperature are things that endanger and change the composition of everything around us. So we want to have it in a stable building. On a micro level, we like to enclose and protect materials by putting them what often is to acid-free folders. Put it in a microenvironment that both protects it from all these things outside and around it, as well as between it. Because if you have two sheets of paper of different composition and one has a high acid, it will transfer the acid. If you have a little, and I'm talking about paper first. If you have a paper clip or a piece of tape and you put it on something, it will degrade it, or a Post-it note. And not only will it would spread whatever glue, or is that it will migrate to the others. So we do things, we layer, interweave things. And bugs are a problem too. It helps keep out bugs a little bit, but that's paper. So certain things like film should be stored flat. Magnetic media like video should be stored upright because of the magnetic particles. So we need to know, as an archivist, born digital, different formats act in different ways. You need machines to view things. You need software to process it. So being an archivist is knowing what different media, what different genre required for preservation or reformatting if we can't keep it, and understanding how it interacts with each other and reacts to the environment around us.
Fascinating. There was one time, I just mentioned this, but the Highland Park News had an article, which I realize now is kind of archival related, but they were talking that that papers up to about 45 years old, but when you went between 45 and 50, the population of that paper diminished quite a bit. And I realize now it's probably breaking up a household. People are overwhelmed with things and they just toss rather than analyze and try to figure out where it could go. What should a family do when they come across paperwork? Is it even relevant to you?
Well, they want to decide what it means to us. Does it have things that we need to document our family, that we need legally in case someone dies, or health insurance? Do we know, is it identified? Do you want to, if it's, we have so many photos in our collection and other collections that are not identified. What is this? Who is this? And if you think, well, this is available to our family, we're going to keep it. And that's great. And we're going to maybe get some folders and boxes, make sure it's not in the basement. It's so easy to store things in the basement, but basements are not a good place by water tables to store things. Find someone in the family wants to keep it. If the family decides, oh, we just can't because, people leaving, people not interested, or the one person that's interested says, I can't take care of this forever. Find a repository, call your local historical society, call the state historical society, call the university and ask them. And they can probably tell you, say, well, that's not what we collect, but so-and-so collects this, so-and-so documents this period of this graphic, so-and-so collects videos. People, there's archives based on genre, there's archives based on certain kinds of music. There's archives based on certain communities like lesbian, LGBTQT plus. There's on different ethnic groups, finding where is the best place to give this. And sometimes it takes some time and work, but usually your local archivist or academic institution will help you with that.
Very enjoyable. I love Highland Park history. Perhaps programs in the future could focus on topics such as churches, schools, retail, early settlers. The early pictures are always very interesting. Okay, so
churches would be good. That could all be good subjects, I think. Churches.
They are, but I can also tell you some of the worst attended programs are the ones on very local history. So you have to support these things, right? It's frustrating. And the other piece is, if you could contribute, if you wish to help in research to do a program, that helps too. Because even though I do programs for the Historical Society,
we love community
look
programs.
At me like I should do something. And sometimes, oh, great, we would be thrilled if you'll do your part. Because really, it's just how much time do you have left in your life at the end of the day, right? Sorry to put it that way, but it's really, many hands make light work, right?
we welcome community contributions. I always learn. I get so much information from researchers and just input too, like, how archivists describe things or preserve them. Sometimes, some good ideas like, well, this is helpful, this is too much, this is not enough. It's good. We appreciate it.
So we're going to continue this discussion next week. You're all welcome. And if you have questions in the meantime, throw them at us so we have time to do a little bit of research. Well, I'm talking really Nancy, but do a little bit of research so we could, respond. I mean, she has a lot of stuff in her head. But
where did I got it? I got it from the archives. That's what I got to remember.
Exactly.
It didn't come in my head organically. It came in my head from working with the archives.
Well, this was great. And Nancy, that was great how you effortlessly rattle off all this great information. Because it takes a lot of time. More. Why don't you put your phone number in there?
Send me an email. I'll be at Stoopy on Saturday.
Oh yeah, she'll be at Stoopy on Saturday. I won't, even though it was my idea. And but I'll be at the Stoopy cabin for the November, and if you got relatives at home and you want them to get out of the house for a little bit, we will have the cabin open the Saturday after Thanksgiving so that you can bring them over there to get they can see local history or whatever it looks like, as well as as well as get people out of the house for a few minutes.
So I don't have an office at the library anymore, so you have to call me or email me to set up a meeting.
Yep. Okay, well, thanks, Nancy. We'll see you next Wednesday.
And thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you for your comments, David. I don't know you, but I'm sure I would be happy to meet you.
We would love to meet you. All righty. Good night, everybody. Bye, Nancy.